Hello everybody, welcome to this S&OP masterclass from Perito Consulting. These masterclasses have the purpose of diving into integrated business planning and supply chain planning in general, hopefully giving you some good inputs on the way. Today's topic is integrated business planning in the aftermarket, and this may be a new topic for many of you out there, but it is a topic that is very relevant for many companies. And today, joining me in the studios, I had invited my good colleague Benjamin Obling, who is the COO in Perito Consulting and has more than 20 years experience implementing these projects for my clients. Welcome, Benjamin.
Thank you.
I think before we get started with the actual aftermarket topic and diving into what happens within the company, I think for the listeners' sake, we need a bit of definition out there. So first of all, what do we mean when we say aftermarket and aftermarket companies?
Yeah, so basically aftermarket is when the company has a main product and then you have some spare parts or consumables that goes along with it. So you basically sell this main product, and then after some time you might need to service it, or some parts of that main product might break down and you need to change those. So the good example is our car, for example. So we buy the car, but it won't drive forever, unfortunately. So we need to change the brakes or the gearboxes, etc. Some of that is planned, so we go in for a scheduled service, and we'll get back to that, I'm sure. And some of it is unplanned, so that's the unfortunate stuff where something breaks down and the car's not able to drive anymore.
Yeah. Okay. So really, a business besides the business, we have the main product, and then we have all the service and the parts afterwards. In many cases.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And I guess the very interesting part about this is that in many cases that's a quite lucrative or profitable part of the company.
Yeah. Okay, so that was the aftermarket. And the other main topic, of course, is the IBP, or the integrated business planning. Could you set just a few definitions on that?
Yeah, so sometimes we define it as a sales and operation planning plus, or you could say on powered up. But basically, it's of course the demand planning, it's the inventory optimization, it's the supply optimization. But there is also a financial aspect to it. So basically, adding the budget. It's making the link across the full company in the planning. So basically making a full end-to-end integrated business planning, both in terms of our operational level, but also on the tactical and even strategic level, looking out 2, 3, 4, 5 years ahead, but also into the sort of order handling of tomorrow.
Okay. So getting into the actual topic of today, aftermarket companies, my point was that it sometimes IBP or sometimes get overlooked in these type of companies. Why do you think that is?
Yes, it depends of course on a lot on the specific company. But you could say one pitfall could be that you're very focused on these main products. So you have your equipment, you have your, let's say, a wind turbine, a car, an analytical device that you're very focused on. Maybe you're sort of engineering-driven company. So you're really, you fancy making up this new or inventing this new product. That's really where your focus is. And you want to look at the next product in the company, and that's where the focus is. But of course, you have all of this equipment standing with your customers, and that's super critical that they get a good customer experience, of course, with that. So that means when something breaks down, they need to have the parts available to have that good customer experience with it, because that might be very critical for the customer, of course, as one part. The other part being this can be pretty profitable if you address it in the right way.
Yeah. And you say pretty profitable, and then my thesis would be that there is a CFO instantly focusing on these areas, but it's not your experience that it has that much focus within these companies.
At least there is a risk that it doesn't get the attention that it should, because if you sort of mix all of it together in your reporting and you don't separate it out, so what is aftermarket, our aftermarket sales, what is the profitability around that, and what is our main product and the profitability around that, you might overlook that the aftermarket can be pretty profitable as one part. The other part be in the spare parts that you need might come from the same item numbers. Even it might come from the same location. So that means it can be pretty difficult to determine what is actually going into our main equipment, our main product, and what is going to the aftermarket, and that can sort of remove the transparency around the profitability, and then you lose out on the profitability of really, you could say, or the opportunity of really making it profitable. Yeah. And it could also be that some of these spare parts that, even though you could say for the production of the main equipment, you can sort of get by and you can plan that, and then you have what you need is available, and you want to reduce your inventory levels. So you tend to then reduce also the spare part for the aftermarket sales, and thereby where you actually get too low and get a too low availability towards the clients, meaning they will have a bad customer experience and you'll lose the gross profit you could earn from that.
Yeah. So actually what you're saying is that in an event you want to do a transformation in your supply chain planning and really upgrade it. Most companies that we meet, they need a business case to do that. They need to get the board of directors on board and really show the numbers. So there might be a golden opportunity here to actually focus even more on the aftermarket part of your business to have really good numbers in your business case and yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really important, not only to come in with the sort of inventory, working capital reduction aim or goal. It might as well be revenue improvement or gross profit improvements, because that could be like the example we had before with the spare part being a bit overlooked. Maybe it's a B product because it's not moving a lot, but when it's moving and when you have sales in the aftermarket, it's a critical sales. You can turn up the price a bit, so you can actually get a quite high profit. So maybe it makes sense to have a higher service level on that aftermarket sales, because then you're ready to sell. And if you might even have competing companies on that spare part sales. If you're in that situation, you really need to balance your service levels to make sure that they are financially balanced, also with the high profitability you have on those elements.
Okay. Maybe to also for the listeners to get an understanding on the situation that these companies are in. Let's play with the thought that they never heard of IBP and doing the best they can in their supply chain footprint with the planning they have. What is your experience around those kind of challenges they are facing without this automation or this focus?
Yeah, I think the main challenge is the transparency, losing the transparency, because if you have a main equipment and in that main equipment you put in a spare part, a certain component, or not, that wouldn't be a spare part in the beginning. It would be like a component going into your product, your car, your turbine, your equipment. You need some of that on stock in order to do the production, but and that's all good. But then afterwards, you also have these aftermarket sales going on, so which can be like a planned maintenance, or it can be like this unplanned. So it's coming out of the blue, and maybe it causes the equipment to no longer work. And if you don't have any IBP system to support this, you want to know that the consumption you have, so basically the material movements you have, is that going to our production? Is it going to consumables? It is for the aftermarket? Is it going to spare parts? Is it a critical spare part? So I mean, does the equipment work if this spare part breaks down? Some of the spare parts it will work still. So with a wind turbine, for example, the handle of getting into the tower, for example, okay, that's okay, but the gearbox, okay, that's critical. That will stop the turbine from spinning, or the gearbox in the car will stop the car from working, but other things might not. So if you don't have that transparency, it will just be a lot of items you have. So you'll have thousands of items, some of them going into the production, some going to aftermarket, some being critical, not critical, blah, blah. But basically you don't have the transparency of what is the demand types that we're looking at here. Mm.
I guess also the companies are very much affected by the supply chain crisis at the moment in the aftermarket. So I'm just triggered by you saying transparency and overview. If you have a global supply chain, this must be very much difficult to handle without this overview and these transparencies.
Yeah, absolutely. And you might end up stocking too much because if you don't know, as an example, if you don't know if it's planned or unplanned, so if you have like scheduled service, for example, or scheduled maintenance, so sometimes you have some peaks in your demand on one of these thousands of items. If you don't know if that is sort of planned or unplanned in some region around the world in a large footprint with a lot of different warehouses, etc., if you just run an algorithm across that and don't have the transparency, you might say, okay, then we need to buffer up because this is a very lucrative business. We're earning a lot of money on this. But then you certainly have a demand of, let's say, 100 pieces on that specific warehouse somewhere down. Now we're a bit into the details, but basically that would mean, okay, then I need to have 100 because I need to be prepared for the next time. But in fact, this was planned. It was a planned maintenance. So it will actually be based on a scheduled service order in our ERP system, etc., if it comes up again. So we don't need those 100 pieces at that specific warehouse. And that's again back to the transparency, you could say. And with having thousands of spare parts, which many of our clients have, so that could be 10, 30, 100,000 spare parts. You could have, let's say, one global warehouse, then you're in a bit better position. But many companies, they need to have a lot more warehouses, going to 1,000 warehouses even in the extreme cases. And that means controlling that, getting the overview of that. That's basically what the integrated business planning can do for you, and making the transparency across that.
Okay, very interesting. So I think if we have those challenges, then of course the question that people really want to know is, okay, how to handle that. So how to approach this. It's easy for us to say, okay, you just have to do IBP and then you'll be safe. But maybe taking it some steps here. How do we approach these challenges if you want to implement and work with those?
Yeah, so you could say one thing would be to create the transparency, and that's really easy to say and not so easy to do. But you could say one thing is that I would certainly recommend is to start looking at the demand types. So basically splitting your demand into what is the reason for the demand. So that could be like what is planned demand. So basically we have some scheduled maintenance, for example. Okay, we need to tag that and be able to separate that from the other demand types. What is then unplanned? So basically something comes out of the blue, our gearbox goes, doesn't work anymore. Okay, so that's like an unplanned demand. We need to tag that as separate, and then we need to tag what is going into the production in the first place to produce our equipment. So then you have those three main demand types, and that can be more. You start to have the transparency around it.
So we're actually starting with a forecasting exercise, even though we're actually talking about an aftermarket. So it's the same mechanism as you would if it was a normal or main product.
A lot of this, you basically have the same issues as you have in a non-aftermarket environment. But here, basically, for example, having the different demand types of planned and unplanned, which you don't have if it's on, let's say, a normal IBP.
Yeah. But is it still also the same exercise going from let's say now we created the demand plan as you talked about, then we have to transform that to the supply forecast or the supply planning. Any specific issues going in there, you have to be very aware.
Yeah, so then you could say you're most certainly probably in the situation that some of these spare parts you need of aftermarket items here, you need to have some availability on stock. So you have some make-to-stock situations where you need to have some stock provided around the world because you need to have a short lead time towards your customers to serve and make sure that the main equipment will get up and running again if something goes down. And there you need to have a way of determining what is the right safety stock at each component level, each material level at the different warehouses. And in that process, one thing is having the right mechanism, the right calculations, the right tools for it. That's one part. The other part is then to discuss which demand types should then go into this. Because, for example, having this situation with the plant schedule, that probably shouldn't be part of your safety stock calculation because you know it well in advance. So that's something you'll plan using the orders. But the unplanned, that is really what you need to have ready and what should go into your safety stock and stock optimization calculation.
Yeah. But I guess you also, in that case, with what you describe here, is very affected also by which kind of frame agreements you have with the client, because you mentioned about safety stock, but you might have a frame agreement saying that we can never go out. You always have to have 3,000 of this gearbox
yeah.
available or whatever. So I guess that's a parameter we need to take into account as well.
Yeah, and that's certainly also a basically setting, of course, the different target service levels on different elements based on what is the contract with the clients, sometimes, or with the customers, sometimes the problem being you have multiple customers, or hopefully you have multiple customers, so that also means you also have multiple different service levels. So you might have the situation where the sales department, not to sort of blame them, but they might have made different agreements with different clients, say, we need 99, we need 98, we need to, never out of stock, and so on. And then you sort of need to say, okay, so all in all, what does that mean? Do we go to 99 then? And what will be the cost of that? So you need to be able to see, what does 99 give us? Can we go to 99, 99.5, etc. As one part with the customer agreements. On the other part, saying, how critical is this component? Again, back to the sort of the handle, and the gearbox. Is this super critical? Does this go into, okay, then the equipment doesn't work anymore, and it might even stop like a whole production line, which is the case for some of our clients. They need to have that ready around the world. So that's the other part going into the stock optimization.
Yeah. And of course, then also the linking over to the production and the capacity. Even though you might produce yourself, you might have vendors helping you, but you need that link as well to the capacity.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, and that might. So what you could do there is of course you set your target service level. Okay, based on the inputs that we just talked about, and then say, okay, are we able to serve that with our factories, with our subcontractors, etc.? Do we need to add some buffer in order to make sure that we have varying lead times, etc.? Okay, then you need to take that into account. A topic which is pretty hot at the moment because a lot of supply chains don't really work. So you need to take that supply lead time into account.
Yeah.
And then adding to that, actually, one additional element that is very important, together with the criticality of the product and the service levels, is the profitability. Because of course you might say, okay, we can get by with the 98, 97% service level in this region around the world for this group of product, for example. But if it's super profitable, maybe it's not critical actually, but it's super profitable. Okay, then we might want to go from 97 to 99, because even though it's a B product, it's not critical. We don't have contracts on it, blah, blah. All of these conditions, they're not in place. But basically, we earn a lot of money from it. So why would we sort of take down the service level from 99.5 to 97 if we're actually making more money providing a high service level because of the high profitability?
Oh, that's very interesting. I guess that's also where the financial link comes in, and you need that overview, making IBP a bit special compared to S&OP.
Yeah, exactly. Where you basically combine the algorithms, of course, of making sure that we can set the right safety stocks, etc., with the robust techniques, etc., but also looking into the business side of it and the business impact of going stock out. What is the cost on our gross profit? And then we basically let our algorithm say, will not allow less than 97%, for example, because from a commercial point of view, even though it's a low profit product and so on, we cannot go below 97 because that won't be acceptable for our clients. But you can go above. So let's have the algorithm, give the algorithms basically the space to say, pick any service level, from 97 to basically 100, if that's possible, where the you could say financial impact is optimized.
Yeah. So actually, if I hear you correctly, within at least large organizations, the aftermarket part will actually be supply chain planning within the supply chain planning. So we actually have it's not separate, but it's not the same either. We need to have that separate focus on the planning.
Yeah, and that's also an interesting point, because basically it needs to have a separate focus, but not be separated, because that's also what we see sometimes with some companies. In order to try to you can say get a grip of the aftermarket compared to the production, we separate it completely, and then we say, okay, so for production we have specific inventories, etc. We cannot touch those inventories with the aftermarket. But there you basically you could say you constrain yourself in a way that is not optimal, because it could be that it makes sense if a customer's production lines is standing still because of a critical component, and there is something you're going to produce. You have it on your production warehouse, which you have then separated out, and then say, okay, you cannot touch that. But okay, maybe it makes sense actually send that to the client. The customer will be super happy. The equipment will be up and running again, and maybe we can replenishment before this production starts. So separating it sort of physically and system wise is also not a good idea. But we need to have separate focus on it in the same system, end to end.
Yeah, so that's actually a very good plan. So when we talk about one common plan for a company, meaning the end goal of an IBP process, then we actually mean one common plan, main product and aftermarket in one but separate focus, if I hear you correctly.
Yeah. So your aftermarket in your main business would basically be a dimension in your IBP setup, reporting, analysis, etc. So you can look at it totally end to end. You can focus at it, and of course there'll be some overlapping cases where you'll have materials going into both.
Yeah, so no, not having two S&OP processes within a given month, but actually trying to integrate it still into one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, very interesting. So another area, of course, is that, we have these challenges. We have approach them like this. What, in your experience, once we are up and running, we have implemented a IBP approach to our supply chain planning. What is your experience around what the companies actually gain on a short and long term from implementing this approach and these tools in their companies?
Yeah, because you could say the transparency as such is not something you gain, right? That's nice to have, or it should be an enabler to achieve something. But basically here, that is the service level towards the customers. And one thing that derived, you could say, impact is obviously gross profit. So basically you sell more because you have a higher availability, if that's what is optimal, because you have your high profitability on the aftermarket. So higher profit from that, basically gross profit, higher revenue is one part. The other part can be maybe you're servicing at a bit too high level. So maybe you've sort of clubbed your critical and non-critical components together and actually have a too high inventory on your non-critical components. Okay, then the impact would be lowering the inventories on that, and then of course reducing the working capital associated with it. And then you could say a commercial gain is happier customers, right? Because if you have equipment, that's a main and quite often very, very expensive piece of equipment that your customers have bought and it's not working. You need to get that up and running again as fast as possible, because it might have derived implications. Yeah. If you have a wind turbine, for example, the moment it stands still, it's not making any money. It's not producing any electricity, for example. Or if you have an equipment which is a part of a production line on a factory, that production line is standing still. That doesn't fly.
Yeah. And I guess in your experience is one question I typically, or something I hear when I come in companies, that we're not focusing that much on this right now. We're just trying to get anything we can on the shelves because of it's finding so hard to get products out of China or Asia, whatever it is. Is there any benefits in terms of IBP in terms of this disruption that we have been facing the last 2 years, both with pandemic and Suez and other things? Any benefits there that you see in your daily work?
Yeah, I think that would be the priority, basically, of the materials, because maybe you have you can take out one container from China, or you have with a certain supplier, you have a certain capacity that is available for you. So the IBP can basically assist you in saying, okay, which materials, which items should I focus on here? What is the most important part? Because we're not able to get everything if that's the case, which is the case right now and seems to be like the new normal, that it's impossible to plan, more or less. But basically the priority, I think, is one of the key elements. What is critical, both for the gross profit on our side, or on our client's side, or you could say the customer. So basically where the equipment is being used. The production line is at what is super critical to make sure that the equipment is still running, which spare parts are more critical than others.
Yeah. And I guess also the demand sensing is also an interesting point here with all this disruption, because a lot of companies will be looking at their planners and say, okay, we just need to know when the next one hits. please.
Yeah.
What's your thought on that? Is there any useful approaches, tools out there that can help in that sense?
Yeah, I really think we've obviously been working a lot with our clients very closely the last 2 years and in these different disruptions and crises, and you could say it's basically during those crises, it's basically important to distinguish. What did I wanted to say? Could you just
the demand centering around?
So basically, it's about combining the algorithms together with the business intelligence, because you might have some algorithms which are, they need to pick it up fast. So that could be one, right? So we have an increase in demand. Okay, we need to pick it up fast. How do we do that? Then we sort of tweak our algorithms to do that. But that might be an overreaction. So some of the things we saw during these last 2 years with some of our clients is basically when you have a large increase in the demand for spare parts, and you'd say, okay, but we have the same equipment standing out there, so why would it suddenly increase? And we've actually seen that. And then it's basically customers buffering up around the world. So you have an increase in demand, but you can actually expect it will sort of fall down to the normal level again, because there is actually no additional real demand out there. It's more like, okay, customers are scared that they'll not be able to get the equipment out there. And in other cases, it is actually increasing. And then you need to go down to weekly, even daily updates of your demand plans with the demand sensing opportunities.
Yeah. So many benefits from this, from our point of view, anyway. Then the next natural question probably is, okay, we need to set this up. We talked about a lot of things already here, and there's even more than we haven't mentioned here today. So natural question, of course, will be where to start in all of this. What would your recommendation be if you're looking to go in this direction?
Yeah, you could say you have the data and the tool side, and you have the process side that needs to go hand in hand, basically. So you could say, okay, where do we start from those? But basically, in our view, making sort of shorter integrations, getting something up and running. Maybe you don't have the perfect transparency yet. Maybe you don't have the perfect process, but rather, get up and running with what you could say minimal viable product. What is the minimum that we need for this to start? Get some experience, then build on that, being more and more advanced as you go, instead of, saying, for example, we need all of our master data to be perfect before we start up. We sometimes hear that, and that's sort of, it's never going to be happen, right? It's, all companies, the master data is a mess, it just to different degrees. So forget about, having perfect data, but get fast into a minimal viable product and then build from there. See that it works. Get the proof. Yeah.
Do you sometimes recommend clients doing like pre-studies or assessments or before getting started to have like a longer plan along with the quick up and go approach?
Yeah, so that's the opportunity of basically getting proof. I mean, is this a good idea? So if you are in doubt whether is this a good idea or not, I mean, is it worth the money and the time that would go into it? Then you can do a pre-study, as you say, what we would quite often do. So what we do is take very detailed data. So that's the sales data on item level across the world in different demand regions, etc. Looking at the inventory levels, looking at all the master data, and basically simulating what would happen if you're having a full IBP end-to-end solution. What would be the impact on the profit? What would be the impact on inventories, etc. And that's certainly worth doing and can be recommended quite often. In other cases, you might have the company saying, we know, I mean, this is a no-brainer. We know this makes sense. We just haven't, gotten around to do it. We don't need to spend the time and the effort to prove it. We know there is a business case, and then you basically just go ahead and start, try it out, and get this basically, and then make sure that you don't build a rocket, a space rocket, if you actually just need, a solid car instead, but that you build something that is sort of appropriate to the problem you have.
Yeah, and having that focus, I guess, as you said, on the minimal viable product, but getting something up and running. But if I hear you correctly, you're still recommending that the product we implement, even though it might be fast and small, or at least having that kind of a sprint approach, it's still aiming at the one common plan for the company. So it's not like only implement demand forecasting and then stopping there and wait for 3 years. It's having the full demand, supply, capacity, all the way to the financials. That's what you're thinking as well.
Absolutely. And in a lot of cases, it will be quite obvious that it's the full journey that makes sense. And basically, you can just embark on it right away and go for the full integrated business planning, and then knowing, okay, maybe it will take a year, but then you actually, full end-to-end integrated business planning with advanced optimization, etc. I mean, it shouldn't take a lot more than that, unless it's a very complicated organization. But you could say, so it's very important that you sort of stress test the tools, the processes, the people capabilities that you're embarking with, that are they able to make the full journey. That's super important, because you need to know that up front. So starting with something which is more basic doesn't mean you should start with a basic solution or a basic, you could say, skill set around. You need to know that you can go all the way, and you can go all the way quite fast, because otherwise you also will never reach the destination. And even though this sounds like, okay, that's the beautiful blue mountains, we'll never get there, but this is possible, and we're doing it every day, and companies are out there. So it's basically not that impossible as it might sound.
No, and I guess combined with that, let's call it sprint approach, where you get something. You will have that added benefit of actually be able to show something very quickly to the stakeholders, because we both know that there's a lot of impatience in an organization. So that will allow us to get some results quite fast.
Exactly, and that basically goes both up and down, you could say, in the organization to get the buy-in, because when you start to prove something, then the whole organizations, from the users, the planners, the head of planning, and the C-level, the CEO, etc., they'll see, okay, this actually works. So let's step on the gas pedal here, and let's move faster, because this really does work. Instead of having this, it was a bit more PowerPoint approach, where you spend a lot of time making what is the requirements, how should it look at the end stage, and now we finally have the opportunity. Everything needs to be perfect, allowed to the last decimal, and then you'll spend 1, 2, even 3 years in some cases, what we've seen with some companies we're getting into, and you're basically still not really delivering results, because you're trying to solve everything from the very beginning, and then you don't get started, and you never reach the destination.
So we need to move away from the pretty PowerPoint and processes actually getting things done, or at least find the right combination between the two.
Absolutely. And we certainly also see, fortunately, a lot of desire to do just that. Customer companies saying, okay, let's open up tools, show us how does it work? We need to have proof. Let's make a pilot, etc. Instead of sort of the large program change management, etc., which we also need to do, but we need to prove that we can move the business.
Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. I can see we are aiming at the end of the show, but I have one final question, because IBP as a general, and also in the aftermarket, we have, of course, how it looks today, but could you shortly give a few words on how you see this moving along? Because the world is changing, and new things comes up, of course, and new opportunities. How do you see integrated business planning in the years to come here?
Yeah, I think the creating the transparency is basically what we're doing now. Being able to change the plans, being able to see the full impact end to end, make the synchronization and so on. That's a big step alone. But being able to make more scenario planning is certainly something that is moving and is already there. And those scenarios to be bigger, basically. Okay, what if we move this whole inventory from here to here? What if we change we reduce the number of suppliers from China? What if we build a new factory? So basically making more larger scenarios is certainly a thing also that we'll see more and more. And then also being able to do that at a lot higher pace. So we need to be able to make quite drastic changes in our setup, in the IPP tool and processes, and then see what is the impact quite fast and have the you could say decisions based on that. And then we have new elements where now we've talked about the more traditional optimization. So like basically the profit, that's what we want to optimize, and we want to have as much profit as possible with the lowest working capital, because then the company is worth more money basically. And that's of course still that will also be there tomorrow for sure. But we basically have other dimensions going into it, and here of course talking about CO2 footprints, etc., sustainability and so on. So basically being able to calculate different CO2 levels in different scenarios. What if we go from plane to sea, etc.? How do we make the right mix in order to optimize that? Because that is actually a new dimension in our optimization, you could say. So our goal is, of course, to make the company being as much worth as possible, and that's the working capital, that's our profit. But now we have a completely different dimension that doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with the two others. It might, on the longer term, it might also cost some money, and then it's basically staying in business, being relevant for you could say the stakeholders, the customers. But you need to find a way to balance both of these two elements. So CO2 and footprint simulations is certainly something that's coming more and more.
Yeah. Very interesting. It sounds like we're not done yet.
No, still work to do. That's nice.
Still work to do.
Yes.
Oh, I can see we're running out of time here. I think it was very, very interesting. Thank you, Benjamin, for joining me here today.
Welcome.
And thank you all out there for listening. We hope you got some good input from us here. If you like what we do here, please remember to click on the subscribe button. We would love to have you on our follower list, and you of course can find all our material on our website where both masterclasses but all other information is available too. So thank you all again for listening. I hope to see you all to the next S&OP masterclass here in Perito Consulting.